Hi, I'm Claire Williamson, an ex-litigator and the co-founder of Leading Minds. With 97% of lawyers complaining that stress is impacting their health, I think it's time that we speak about how challenging the pressures of the legal industry can be. So this podcast is a space where lawyers can come together to discuss how they've overcome the challenges they face in their role and gone on to thrive within their career. Whether you're a trainee, a partner, or anyone in between, I really hope that this podcast will leave you feeling inspired, empowered, and with the confidence that you can leave your mark on the legal industry. So today I'm joined by Veronika Koroleva, who is the Trade and Commodity Financial Partner at gunnercooke. And Veronika is going to be speaking to us about the role of mentors in the legal sector. So thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. Lovely to see you. Hi, everyone.
And I thought first it would be really interesting to hear a little bit more about your journey into the legal sector. So where you studied, where you trained, and what brought you to being a partner at a firm as well. I'm sure lots of people are very interested in that, in the partnership route.
Okay. How far back do you want me to start?
You can go as far back as you want.
Right. Okay. Well, I was originally, in my previous life, I used to be a lawyer in Russia. So I originally trained and qualified, went to uni, trained, qualified as a Russian lawyer and worked for a few years in Moscow. So that was a long time ago. I then had an opportunity to move to the UK, and as with all people, not all, but a lot of people who do moves like that, it was, it's always, yeah, well, you tried for a few years and then, you will of course go back, but, that was over 20 years ago, and, here I am. So that was an interesting story. But when I came over here, one of the things, one realizes with sort of my then background was that the only way of becoming a qualified English lawyer was to redo part of the studies. So I did have to do what was then called CP and then LPC. I think it's called GDL now. So yeah. It's basically my Russian law degree was viewed as a degree. So it counted as
my Scottish law degree, if it makes you feel better.
Sorry?
So was my Scottish law degree, if it makes you feel better. I
don't think bad about it. It's just to explain. So I did have to, in terms of my sort of training to become an English solicitor, it was a fairly, in that sense, sort of, I guess, fairly usual. So CP and LPC, and then training contract at what was then Denton Wildsapt, and now, so by now has become Denton's, the largest law firm in the world. So, yes, I did my training contract at Denton's. Which was then a good, reputable sort of mid-size city firm. I did my last seat with the Trade and Commodity Finance practice, and again, which was at the time the best, the one, in the the leading one in the field. So it's a fairly sort of easy choice because it fitted so many. It ticked so many boxes and fitted so many of my interests. It was fantastic work. It was a really good team, really good attitude towards training the junior lawyers, which I'm hoping, when I moved on to running my own team and training my own people, I've sort of inherited as, giving people lots of responsibility early on and allowing them to develop. So that was, very international work. So it was no brainer. So I was very lucky, because as a trainee, you don't really have much of a choice a lot of the times as to where you end up having your seats. I don't know if that changed since, that many years ago. I somehow don't think so. It still is a bit of a give and take, or sort of a bit of hit miss. So me landing in that seat for my last seat was a really lucky thing to have happened. So yeah, and then I stayed. And then, so I stayed with that practice and with the firm for a very long time. I was Denton's altogether for 15 years, which is a very long time. Eventually became a partner there. And then, again, a few years after I became a partner, a lot of the people in the practice left to pursue their own interests in other firms, sort of in different firms. So that was a very good chance to run that practice and be in charge of it, which was a fantastic opportunity. Again, something that I really loved, but again, part of, as with all things that happen with us in our careers, it's always a mix of what you want and what you work for, plus things that circumstances that happened. So that was really cool. That was a really cool thing to have done. And then eventually it stopped working for me. So I left and I took some time off to just rethink what I wanted to do with my career. For a while thought I probably didn't want to do law anymore, because quite frankly, because I didn't see quite sort of what other options would they be in private practice other than sort of the traditional private practice route. So during that time I trained as a coach, so worked with coaching clients, really loved it. I think this is one of the really useful, that is taking time off generally, sorry, slightly going off topic, but taking time off generally at some point when you are quite a few years into your initially chosen career. I'm a strong advocate for that. I think if you can do that, if you can allow yourself to do that, you're financially okay doing that, I think is a really good thing to do, because it helps you look at your priorities. It helps you just sort of better understand what is it that motivates you going forward, where you want to be. And it also helps you to reflect on what you have learned, what you have done up to then, and how you may do things differently next time, or whether you even want to do these things differently or not, next time. It's a really good thing to have happened to me, to have that chance to have the time off. And I really loved studying coaching and working with coaching clients, because I think it's, again, once you already have a certain amount of life experience, people management experience, having a bit of structuring theory sort of on top of it to help you sort of, again, reflect and learn, I find is incredibly useful. So again, that was a really cool thing to have done. And I still do quite a fair bit of coaching and mentoring, which is, I know, what you want to talk about later on. But in terms of my legal career, I eventually, an opportunity came up for me to join gunnercooke, and that was at the time a very new and interesting thing for me to even consider, which is, again, interesting, because if anybody would have asked me when I was still back at Dentons whether that's something I'd ever want to do, it just wouldn't even cross my mind to do something like that. Because, again, I think that's part of why, or rather, that's part of one, when you are in a certain sort of structure, doing things in a way that's traditional for the industry, say in a traditional law firm, it's actually, you've been there for a long time, it's actually quite hard to imagine doing things differently, which I guess is one of the reasons why, any innovation in any industry, and certainly the delivery of legal services, is, it's not easy, and it's quite, it takes a while. I think it's only recently that it's becoming, it started making quite, actual impact on the market. It certainly wasn't by then the case 10 years ago. So gunnercooke is essentially, unlike a traditional law firm, with a pyramid and, partnership, it's essentially a collective of self-employed lawyers, or self-employed, and mostly most of my partners are senior experienced people who would have been in private practice for at least 10 years before coming to gunnercooke. So we largely don't have sort of large teams to manage, or, again, some people do, but largely it's sort of basically what you see, what you get. So clients engage us as individuals, in the sense that, they pick who they want, as opposed to going for the name, the firm, more than anything else. So, which is, again, it's very interesting setup, a very interesting, again, learned a lot, which is always a good thing. And certainly in terms of looking at how there is a credible alternative to delivery of legal services, at least in certain, as everything suitable for more, for some areas more than others, but it certainly is quite an exciting, experience to be involved in. But one of the reasons I'm doing, like for personal sort of, my personal reason for doing mentoring of junior lawyers quite so much is because I didn't have my own team. I didn't manage my own team anymore. And actually that was, as I realized over the time, one of the, not the managing bit, but the sort of getting people, helping people to get to the level where they can perform, while helping them develop professionally was one of my favorite parts of the job as a partner in traditional law firm. So I sort of missed that.
Yeah,
So me, you know, so me is my personal reason for doing mentoring of junior lawyers is to be involved in that.
yeah, and thank you for giving that overview. I think for many people listening to podcasts, they're probably junior members of the team, and it can feel very daunting to even be thinking about partnership route or people who've made, partnerships. So I always think it's really interesting to hear people's journeys and where that's brought them to as well, and especially hearing a little bit about your current setup at gunnercooke. And interesting as well, I really love the fact that you said that one of the parts that you love most about your role was actually helping with other people's career progression, because I do think that many people probably feel reluctant to ask for help. They feel like they're a burden. So actually hearing that you are actively seeking it because you enjoyed it so much is probably really changed a few people's perception around about the support that they can maybe get from their teams and from partners as well. So thanks for sharing that. The first thing I wanted to kind of know was, how did you actually get into the mentoring? Did it come through your coaching work?
Yes, it did, and it's more. I think the most relevant sort of, I guess, bit of for what you want to talk about, sort of about lawyers, that I do is I do with an organization called AccuTrainee. So to explain a bit of what they do, they're providers of flexible junior legal resource. I think they started as doing trainees only, but that's not the only thing they do now. So I think they also supply paralegals and junior qualified lawyers. So what the sort of the model that they have with their trainees is they are employed by AccuTrainee, but they're seconded to private practices or in-house teams that are in need of trainees. And the sort of the benefit for the clients, the ultimate sort of users of trainees, is that the regulatory burden of having a trainee and making sure they get all the relevant experience and tick all the boxes and, get all the right training and, all the paperwork's completed, is actually stays with AccuTrainee. So from the SRA's point of view, they are the trainee supervisor.
Yeah.
So, but they're not obviously the ones who are seeing their trainees doing the work on a daily basis. So there's several things they do to make sure that, it all works out. And one of these things, as all of their trainees have an assigned mentor. So we meet every month, and one of the things we talk about all sorts of things, but one of the things we talk about with my mentees, which is what I have to do for AccuTrainee, is to look through, I think it's called the trainee journal, whatever it is that SRA calls it, but basically, the record of what they've done, obviously, with sensitive information removed, was about the skills and the type of work and, what have they learned and all that. And having the same, and it's it's obviously useful, if there's anything we need to unpick or discuss, we can do that. But having the same person looking over that over the period of, well, ideally the whole of 2 years, but over the period of several months, means that there's someone sort of watching over whether there is progress, whether it's development, whether they, people keep doing the same, never happened, but, whether they keep doing the same thing over and over, in terms of work, or whether there's variety, so they're actually learning different things. But also, if you have that same person, third person looking over it as trainees move seats, I think it's incredibly useful because I can see how they develop, my mentees develop different skills as they move, between different people who could be, because of AccuTrainee's model, have nothing to do with each other, be completely different organizations. So they have no connection and no knowledge, about the previous, the legal's previous experience. So that, as I say, that's incredibly interesting, because I'm looking back at that, and as the more I was doing that, the more I was looking back at that, trying to remember both my times when I was a trainee, but also my time when I was a trainee supervisor. And I've had trainees sitting with me for about I think it's 8 years. I think I've counted it.
Wow.
So I think I told you that.
Yeah,
I tried to count. I think it was,
yeah,
I think it was 8 years. So you get someone sort of, there must have been 16 people
yeah,
that are coming to sit with me every 6 months. And I don't think my previous firm was any different in that sort of setup from any other large city firm. I don't think there was anyone who would be looking over individual trainees, saying that their experience, that they're actually developing and they've got all the right skills and their experience is actually, developing them the right way. I mean, of course, there is, like in any big firm, there's structure and what have you, but it's sort of geared more towards, arranging and making sure trainees move between seats, so you cover the need, you find places for, for people, and what have you, the whole, I mean, which is incredible amount of admin, absolutely. But I don't think there is that role or that person or people in the firms. And it's slightly different from the role a trainee supervisor would play, because again, especially if you're in the middle of, if you're running your own matters, you're in the middle of basically lawyering and you have a responsibility for training, your focus will inevitably be on, okay, well, I need to make sure that they actually do the work and do it well, and I'll explain it so they can do it right and maybe do it better next time, but not necessarily on, okay, well, they've done this sort of work many times now, so they sort of know how to do it. What other bits of work I can give them to develop different set of skills? I mean, you do sometimes think about it, but realistically, that's, with all the other things you have to think about, it's probably not
top of your priorities list.
Probably not. I'm again just being realistic, even if you're a good supervisor.
I agree, and we see that often. With the best intentions in the world, it's very difficult managing a busy workload whilst also kind of supporting another person in their role. So, in terms of mentorship, what role do you think the mentor really plays for the mentee?
Well, it depends on, I guess, it depends on the sort of the setup and the circumstances. It could be a lot of different things. I guess if we're still talking about trainees, that's a sort of for as far as trainees are concerned, I guess having, especially if it's a third-party mentor, so it's not your supervisor who's meant to also do some sort of mentoring. So with you, that's the ability to have a sounding board where you're not entirely sure, not about individual questions, because it's not meant to be about, I don't know the answer to the legal question. That's no. It's more about, I'm not sure about the approach, or maybe, if I can run through, I don't know, either difficult situation or just approach, or what or whether or not, I don't know, the larger or long-term career goals of trainees, actually, how to basically work together, marry together, the longer-term career goals and the immediate goal of, do the seat, be as successful as you can in the seat, move to the next one or qualify. Because, everybody has their own ideas as to where they want to be in X years' time.
Yeah.
So it's again, which can match the sort of ideas of their employers or may not, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just you sort of, again, having a third party who can help with that, I think, is valuable.
Yeah, and as you've obviously been a supervisor and you've been a mentor, would you say that as a mentor you feel people are a bit more forthcoming with maybe any challenges or concerns that they have because they feel they're not being judged? Because one thing I always felt, and I'm sure, the thousands of trainees I've worked with have said the same, with working so closely with supervisors, although you might have a really good working relationship with them, you are still very mindful and conscious that they're ultimately the person that reports back, and kind of plays a part in whether you are, ultimately kept on, but also kept within that department if that's one you want to qualify into. So there is a mild kind of conflict of interest, even if you do have a good working relationship. Would you say as a mentor you find that people are more likely to have open conversations, or would you not see that there's been a huge difference between the two roles?
Oh, there absolutely is a difference. And that has to be, as a mentor, I think I'm meant to be a person people, it won't work if my mentees don't trust me. It doesn't mean that, first time we have a conversation, it switches on, and everybody tells me their life story. That would be strange. And it doesn't happen. But, you can work on building relationships, or a relationship of trust. And yes, especially if you are talking about sort of either difficult things that happen at work, or, tricky things, or, as I say, some sort of longer term goals. Yeah, of course, that has to be built on some sort of a, trusting relationship. Otherwise it's just not going to happen. As a supervisor, yes, as any, I guess, in any sort of people management scenario, yes, there has to be a certain amount of trust between the parties, because that's, it would be deeply unhealthy to have absolutely none. That's, but it is very different, and yes, I would say as trainee, if we are talking to trainees, yes, as trainee, you should be mindful to not bring everything that comes up, is about to come out of your mouth to your supervisor, because there are people, yes, there are no silly questions and all that, and yes, you don't want people not to ask questions or not to seek help. There's a difference, and there's a balance, and learning that balance is one of the things trainees should learn. But fundamentally, yes, they shouldn't be just bringing every single thing to the supervisor, I guess, from the supervisor. But because this, whether or not this is, whether it's fair or not, everything that you ever, as a trainee, everything you ever tell me, I'll remember. So it will color my judgment. So if you consistently do ask, or do raise silly things, or you're constantly having issues with something or other, and everything lands on my plate as a supervisor, that's probably not ideal.
Yeah.
And again, this is not to discourage people, because it is different from, asking people to not, or rather asking people to, yes, please seek help, please ask questions. There's a difference. I mean, if you are seriously asking your supervisor or whoever's giving you work for help, or you have a question about the work you're doing, the first thing you should do is actually try to figure out something yourself.
Yeah.
So when you go and ask the question, you say, okay, well, I think it's this, or this is what I've tried. Maybe it didn't work, and I don't, now I don't know the alternative, or it worked, but, this is something I want to check with you, or I want to check this before I spend too much time doing this. So you show what you've done first, and then you ask for help, and then you ask the question. But sometimes it is about just, I have no clue, so can someone help me to just even figure out? And arguably, if you are in that sort of, in the scenario of you're about to ask that of a person who, who can have an effect on your future, on your career, then maybe, maybe you should.
Yeah, and I think what I kind of hear you saying as well is that it's not about, there's always going to be those situations where you have to go to someone and say, I have got no idea, no idea. But if you can, have a little think about what the solution might be, or to really reframe your question, because if you are just kind of expecting someone to babysit you through your traineeship, that of course is going to impact on the supervisor's kind of perception of you as an individual. So I think that's something that I hear time and time again from people, that if you could try and bring a solution to the table, it's a really great opportunity to use your initiative as well. That is going to help you, really shape people's perception of you as an individual who has got strong self-awareness and self-leadership skills.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think that's what I've told all my trainees, and I certainly keep repeating that to my mentees now, is that don't just, it not only does it make a bad impression, but it's just generally not the right approach to say, well, I don't know, tell me what to do, or tell me how to do it. It's like, have a think, at least should be able to explain why you don't know. At the very basic minimum, you should, like, as you say, is have enough self-awareness to, okay, this is the area where I know nothing. So even the basics I don't know. So I probably need to figure out, I don't know, the general structure of the issues there before I can even attempt it. It's like, it's a very, very basic minimum. And I have to say, genuinely, from working with, having my own team, working with junior lawyers, I think there's very few things annoy me quite so much as having someone who should know how to, not necessarily how, how to do it, but where to find the information or how to approach it, instead of just spending 30 seconds of, I don't know, opening the precedent library and finding the right thing, to just ask me, just like, well, what should be this, that. You know that, I know, if you don't know, you should, and spend a couple of minutes, just figure it out, or at least phrase the question that I think it's this.
Yeah.
Is this right, before I spend time there? Because yes. So yes, that's.
Yeah, and I see that actually quite often, and I think back when I think, oh God, I would not have liked me to have been a trainee to be my supervisor, because there was definitely times that I was so keen to show that I was willing and keen and capable and I was responsive, that maybe I didn't actually take those minutes and just have a think about how I could tackle it. I just wanted to kind of show that I was there and I was accessible. So I think especially with remote working, when people have been really concerned about lack of exposure, they've been instantly responding, but maybe not taking the time. So another, I think, really great tip. And I think, you've made it so clear in terms of mentors being a sounding board, being people who can really help guide you, both short term and long term in your career progression. Spit out, Claire, sorry. But how do you actually think people should go about finding a mentor? And do you think that there's real value in having a mentor inside your law firm or outside, or what's your kind of preference on that? I suppose there's benefits to both.
Well, that's okay. Well, I guess how does one find a mentor? I guess the first question, assuming there is no structure in your organization where there's a program. I mean, if there's some sort of a program or some sort of a formal way of getting one, that should be your starting point, and then see if that works out. But I guess before you even join any sort of mentoring program, in your own mind, and it's not just for trainees, it's for everyone. I mean, even like at partner level, we'd all benefit from mentoring, at least from time to time. Just ask yourself, what is it that you want to achieve by that? Sort of, why is it that you think you need one? What do you think is going to help you with? Is it, as we were talking about, is it just having an impartial someone to just run things past? Because sometimes it's literally just, you talk things through without that person even talking back. You sort of already have it sorted out in your mind a bit better. Is it to get advice? For example, you want to figure out what your next career move should be. You want to talk to someone about what the options are, what might be, good things, but, have good things as to how to progress. Are you trying to, advance your career in your current organization? Yeah, in which case you probably is not so much the mentor you're looking for, is actually have someone who's going to advance your case for you. So it's what's typically called sponsor. It's even more important than a mentor. So just have this sorted out in your mind, sort of what is it that you're looking for, because then sort of a success of any sort of mentoring relationship is about the parties being clear about what they actually want to get out of that.
Yeah.
And that, once you have that sort of clarity in your mind as to this is why I think I would benefit from a mentor, that would inform how you go about looking for one. Because, well, again, to take a simplistic example, if your goal is to advance in your own organization, then maybe, you should be looking for someone who can help you with that in your own organization. If you're thinking about generally options for my career and whether or not to stay in this organization or what other things I can think about, then maybe a third party, not someone from, I don't know, your firm, might be better.
Conflict of interest there.
There will be conflict of interest, which, you don't necessarily want to sort of go there. But also, if it's someone from outside, they might have a completely different view of what else is out there that people in your organization might not have, just because, we all see the world from where we are. So that might be, then you look there, if it's more about sort of closer to what I was just describing, my work with like a trainee is more about, having some sort of a regular I don't know, regular opportunity to discuss sort of
Yeah.
issues that arise, that's, you know, sort of points out to some sort of a maybe more formalized, maybe, you know, again, I think it's better to have someone from the outside, because that means you can run if there are say difficulty, even if it's not sort of difficult, you know, issues at work. If you have to explain any sort of scenario or any sort of issue they're dealing with to a completely third party, you strip out the necessary details and you by definition make it not personal. Yeah, so you have to give the details for that third party to understand what you're talking about. You get a very different perspective than if you simply ask a different colleague, well, how would you deal with that, or how would you approach this, because then they're in the same, you don't get quite the sort of the same impartial view. But so how would you go about finding a mentor? If it is within your power, within your gift, you know, you can lobby somehow to have a mentorship program established in your organization, do that. It's probably a bit more difficult if you're a trainee to lobby for that, but if you can push for that, you know, you do, because that's useful and that's a good thing to do. If it's you know, if it's about sort of getting more of a sort of side view, side help, think about who do you know in the industry, who do you know outside of, say, again, your firm or your organization, who you can talk to. Ask other people if they know someone who'd be happy to talk to, give you a bit of advice. I mean, I do from time to time get people contacting me just to chat about different things, and sometimes they're referred to by other, you know, people I used to have worked with before.
Yeah, sorry, there's a slight time delay there and I just cut you off. Interesting that you say that, because I often actually have people contact me as well, given obviously I've got a slightly alternative career path as well, and I'm quite visible on LinkedIn. How does it make you feel when people approach you? Because I think people are unwilling, because they, again, come back to this burden issue. They sometimes feel like they can't contact this person because they're going to be really, really busy and they're taking up their time. Personally, when people contact me, I always feel a bit flattered, actually, and anything within my power that I can do to give my time, and sometimes that's not feasible, sometimes I've just got too much on, but I will take the time that I can. And I wondered how that makes, you know, how do you feel when people approach you? Because, yeah, it might play into this kind of helping people get over this reluctance or thinking, well, I can't get in touch with that person because they're really busy and really important.
Well, you know, if the person is busy and can't be bothered, they just, you know, they have a very easy option of never replying. That's, you know, it's very simple. I think I would encourage people to approach other people and ask. And as I say, I mean, if you completely don't know that person, it might be a bit more difficult than if you could get someone to connect you, introduce you, or things like that. But I don't know if there, that's sort of that's the detail as to how to you find them and, you know, how do you approach them. I guess it's more the manner in which you approach people. So if you, it has to be a bit more than just help me.
Yeah,
it has to be a bit, well, I guess like with any networking, you know, a bit of, you know, this is why you think, you know, this is why you found them, you know, or you wanted to approach them. I don't know. I mean, flattery will get you at least halfway, I guess. Yeah. But it's, you know, some sort of, you know, why you are approaching them. And also, I guess, whether or not that's appropriate for the very first contact, but again, be clear about why you're approaching them. Then be clear about what is it that you want these people to do for you. If it, like, be it, I'm at a crossroads, I just want to pick your brain about, I don't know, options, you know, on the market for people at my level with my expertise, or, you know, as you say, with, you know, what other careers are available, or, you know, so but just be a bit specific, because there's like, yes, I probably do feel a bit flattered when people ask me. So it's like just the fact that they ask is never a bad thing. It's all more positive than negative.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like at worst, it's it's indifferent. But no, I think it's like the fact that they ask you is more a positive. If again, it may be that people ask you for things you can't help them with, but that's, you know, such
But
is
at least
life.
that gives you the opportunity, I think, if they've got an awareness as to why they're asking you, you can then make that call and that decision, and you feel much better. I think, as someone who also is approached, being able to go back and say, yeah, that's great. I'm happy to have a call and talk to you about alternative careers in the careers in the legal sector, whatever that be. But if someone just kind of asks, like, can I just have a quick, can I have a 30-minute call with you? I'm a bit like, oh, I don't know if this is something I can help with. So I do agree with you, having that for planning in your mind, think, why am I approaching this person? Why are they the relevant individual? Also makes people far more likely to respond if they are the relevant person. If they're not, to maybe put you in touch with someone else. So I think that's also a really important point.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Yes, because if I know why is it that you're asking me, and I know from the outset that I'm probably not the right one, you know, the right person to help, well, at least I can explain to you why I'm not the right one. But again, I can suggest maybe, or who else you can talk to, or how to approach things, because, you know, something. But it's, as again, as with going back to what we sort of were talking about just a bit earlier, the same idea, just asking people for help without explaining to them, not in details, like not like writing an essay on that point, but just without being clear in your own mind, what is it that you need help with? Is just not, it's just not useful. It's like you're wasting your time and their time, and that's what you'd like to avoid. Because you'd like, even if you found someone, or you were introduced to someone who you think is useful for whatever it is that you're asking them, even if they can't help you right then, you know, that potentially that's a good connection to keep for the future. So you'd want you'd want to make a good impression. But to be honest, like, going back to your sort of very, very sort of first question on that, it's better to ask than not to ask. I mean, let other people say no. I mean, why would you stop yourself from doing something that could potentially be beneficial? As long as you're sort of respectful and not hounding people for responses, you know, that's, as I say, the worst that can happen. Or they either say no, can't help, sorry, or they just won't respond.
Yeah.
So what? You've spent maybe a little bit of your time, and that's it. I mean, you haven't lost anything. You potentially, you know, could have found someone who's actually helpful.
Yeah, thank you. That's been so interesting. I think hearing it from, you know, someone who is a mentor and has been a supervisor as well, I think will really give lots of food for thought for junior members of the team when they're looking at maybe, you know, investing you know, their time in finding a mentor and getting them to really think about what they're actually looking for. It's really, really useful. So thanks for taking your time to share that. I always finish off the interview with a couple of questions, and the first thing I'd love to know is, what does resilience mean to you?
Okay, what does resilience mean to me? I don't know, the ability to face adversity or difficulty, and not necessarily, well, I'll persevere even if I die on that hill. No, that's not resilience, but sort of knowing, I guess, is a combination of being able to face adversity and actually, or difficulty, and actually taking it on, but also knowing how to, sort of knowing when to, I don't know, give up and decide that hill is definitely not
Not for you. It's not your hill.
just give it up already. I guess having that. Yeah, no, well, it's what's I don't know.
I put you on the spot here.
Yeah, I know.
Again,
There's just like so many things that suddenly come to mind on that. But I think it's a combination of, yes, I think it is a combination of being able to take on something difficult and knowing how to, not in terms of I do this first and then I do that, no, not like plan of action, but sort of in terms of how, emotionally, or in terms of my time, like, how do I do that? And maybe in certain circumstances, as I say, deciding no, that's just like, this is where I'll walk away. I think that's probably what it is.
And the next one is a big one. What would your number one tip be for sustainable success in the legal sector? If you could give people one tip, what would that be?
Ooh, that's a big question. My big tip, I guess it would be define success on your own terms. Because before you start thinking about, well, I mean, we are, you know, in legal profession, you know, with so many, I mean, most of us are ambitious people, at least some of the time, at least, you know, to some extent, but this is a profession where ambition is quite sort of a common thing. But before we start before each one of us starts saying, oh, you know, I want to be successful in this, or I want this as a measure of my success, actually ask yourself, is that what, you know, why do I want that? Is that actually what I want? So you have that internal freedom to decide what's important to you and to measure what you are achieving by your own sort of measurements. By your own sort of ideas of what success is. And if success for you is the most sort of straightforward, I want to be, you know, I want to be a partner in, you know, that little amount of time and earn as much money as I possibly can. If that is genuinely what you want, well, fantastic, go for it. If that's not sort of straightforward what you want, and then, you know, other things, and for most people, there are other things, and these things like money and position, they also mean something beyond just sort of, you know, the number of zeros on your bank account or whatever title you have. That also has meaning. Like, why is that important? Actually take some time to reflect, you know, decide, why is that important to me? Or even more valuable, if that is important, but how much am I prepared to pay for it? And I don't mean necessarily in any sort of negative way, but life is give and take. You're not going to achieve any success, however you measure it, by not spending time, money, effort, some sort of sacrifice. So what is success for you? What in your terms, what does that mean for you? And how much are you prepared to pay for it? And have that check in with yourself, maybe at different points in your life and in your career, because that will change. What we want and what we are prepared to do and what's important to us in our 20s is different, in our 30s is different in our 40s. So again, just be conscious about it.
I love it.
And then, you know, again, like what other people think about how successful you are ultimately shouldn't matter.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think your own personal definition of success is your number one kind of driver towards your personal contentment, your fulfillment within your personal and professional career. So thank you so much for sharing that as well. And thank you for taking the time to speak to me today. I know you're very, very busy, but I do really appreciate you sharing your insight into, you know, kind of all things mentors and supervisor as well. I'm sure there's been many people that have taken really useful tips from today's recording.
Well, thank you for inviting me again. It was an absolute pleasure, and asking me big questions that I haven't thought about for a while.
Thinking.
So, maybe I should be asking them, you know, a few of those myself soon. But yeah, thank you so much.
You're very welcome. And to everyone listening to the podcast today, thank you so much for joining us. Please feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn at Leading Minds, where we will be sharing the weekly episodes of the podcast, and you'll be the first to see it there. So thank you, everybody, and I hope you've enjoyed today's session.